Hello and welcome back to Atmosphere Electric. I'm Rich. There's Fran. How are you, bud?
I'm not too bad, you?
Well, yeah, I've got to be honest with you, it's quite around for some football to watch. I can't believe how quickly it feels like it's gone from all to nothing.
Well, anything to watch, really. It's just, there's just not a lot going on, is there?
Well, I was into the IPL, my team winning, thankfully, for the first time in 18 years. Uh, and so that's now stopped. I've even found myself watching tennis late last night to keep myself entertained.
Yeah, I was on Portugal.
Okay.
Yeah, I was watching that for a bit.
It
I
was that
thought,
good.
yeah, managed to get on that at the end. But yeah, there's not a lot to watch, is there?
There
Quite
isn't,
boring.
but the last big game was obviously the Champions League final. PSG absolutely dismantling Inter Milan, and let's be honest, we kind of spoke about the fact that we thought that PSG would win, but I don't think anybody saw it being 5-0 there.
I don't think anyone did. I thought we said that PSG were the best team in the competition from a long way out, so we got that correct. But I thought Inter, with the style of play and sort of some of the players that got, would have actually have caused some problems, and they didn't. It was one of the most one-sided finals I've seen. I've heard quite a lot of people say it was quite a boring final. I wasn't bored by it. I was just mesmerised by the style of PSG. I just thought what worried me about it was I looked at that team and I thought they could dominate for 5-6 years and nobody could get near them. So that was worrying. Good to obviously to see a different team, possibly a dominant force, but worrying for the rest of the teams that they could be scrambling around here because PSG look by far and away the best team in Europe.
Yeah. What I hope is that actually it moves the style of football along. So we'd all kind of followed the Pep Guardiola system, and we have very methodical build up, goes out wide, comes back inside, goes out wide, comes back inside. And actually now what they've shown us is almost a little bit more like that. It felt a bit more like that Liverpool heavy metal of Jurgen Klopp, where there is still patterns of play, of course there is, but actually your right back ends up on the left wing, your left back ends up on the right wing, and we're all attacking together, and it's at pace and it's exciting, and you're allowed to dribble if you want to. So I'm hoping that actually that changes the kind of the course of how people coach teams moving forward.
I hope so, because if we get a lot of replications of the PSG side, we're in for some tremendous viewings of games of football, aren't we? So to me now, there's nothing worse than the Guardiola style of play. I just completely bored of it now. When it first came around, everyone was going, "Oh, what lovely football!" It's boring now. So I'd love to see the PSG style replicated across European leagues. I just think it's brilliant to watch, but it just guarantees you goals, doesn't it? It's exciting, gets you off the edge of your seat, and watching people like Vitinha take the ball and just look so at ease on the ball. Like he's so small, he just can't get the ball off him. Like it's just phenomenal to watch.
Yeah, there were so many subplots, wasn't there? Obviously, there was the Luis Enrique backstory. There was the fact that PSG had never won it, the fact that PSG are doing it without any superstars, the Messis, the Neymars, the etc. etc. But actually, there's also this other current of people that are still kicking off because PSG is still spending, hundreds and hundreds. They're one of the most expensive assembled teams with the highest wage bill. Yet we're all kind of getting confused. This is like plucky PSG, but sometimes you just got to pay the money for good players, and they have got very, very good players.
I I actually would look at it a completely different way as to where people are going, oh, it's still the most expensive squad ever assembled, which actually, when you look at the numbers, it's a very expensive squad that's been assembled. However, they've not paid astronomical fees for some of the players. You look at Vitinha and Doué. It's been good scouting as well, and it's been good football business. They've not paid huge fees for them. Yes, they are 30-40 million. It's a lot of money. Like Pacho at the back, I'd never even heard of him before he went to PSG, if I'm being honest. He looks one of the best defenders in the world. They look absolutely fantastic. So I look at it the way and go, that's how you run a football club. I know they've got endless money with the ownership and that sort of stuff, but from an actual transfer strategy, they've gone and got players that fit into positions in a style of play. I just think it's brilliant what they've done.
And what they need, the one sign they made a while ago that was Luis Campos, the sporting director, internationally or certainly across Europe, was revered as being one of the best sporting directors out there. And what they've done is they've highlighted good players at a good age, and they've gone and paid the appropriate fee to get the deal done. And you've spoken probably 50 times alone now. Kvaratskhelia, how does the Premier League team not get him over the line?
That's absolute mad. I'm still absolutely baffled that some of the Premier League teams didn't go in for him. And then I've heard some people go, he might not have wanted to move to Premier League. He'd have wanted to move to the Premier League for Napoli, 100%. When you look at some of the players being linked for transfers in this, under the windows open, this current window, and some of the fees that I'm seeing, getting him for, I think it was 55 million, is an absolute bargain.
Yeah, what I would say is, and by the way, I've fallen down a bit of a rabbit hole this week around salaries and wages of teams and players. He's on €315,000 a week at PSG. Now, off the top of my head, I think that's about 280 grand. I could be wrong either way, forgive me, but I haven't done the research. But that's sort of ballpark figure, so it does limit the team. But there are, look at Manchester United, they've got two players that are earning more than that. Man City, Liverpool, Arsenal. So, like you say, it's in the ballpark figure. It's not like he's earning 500 grand a week. It would have seen him completely out of the ballpark. But, you look at that PSG team and their weekly salary of 3.8 million euros is some crazy numbers. Those players are getting very, very well paid, but they are also very, Donnarumma's done 250k a week, but he came across as a free transfer. They've just gone out early, haven't they? Got the players not at a good age. They're all very young, as we keep talking about. They're paying the right amount to get the deal done. As an example, Spurs fans won't want to hear this, but Desiree Doué was at the top of the training ground last year on the cusp of signing for Spurs. He's got 115 grand a week at PSG. Spurs are offering him 80. Spurs end up with Wilson Odeberry as the replacement. And that's the difference between getting the deal done and buying generational talents and not.
Especially, you just used the phrase generational talent, especially as when you look at some of the players, it must have been clearly obvious that he was that good. I mean, I don't know if you've seen Jed Spence's comments on social media afterwards. He was saying, told you so, because he got interviewed to say who's the best player you've played with when he was on loan at Rennes. And he said, Desiree Doué. And everyone was like, who? And he's going, I told you, he's unbelievable. So it must have been obvious for scouts that he was that good. And if it was down to 20, 30 grand a week, you just got egg on your face there, haven't you? Like, just pay it. Because 100 grand in the Premier League is not a lot of money for top clubs now, is it?
No, and wrapping this up, it just highlights that just paying a lot of money for players and wages doesn't guarantee you success. PSG are the perfect example of, they've done that with Neymar, Messi. Didn't really get close, bottled it. They're spending probably the same amount of money, but spread across more players, quality, in depth, on the bench, coming off. And they've now got the right manager to bring the best out of them. And that is what it looks like. There is a complete correlation between the wages you pay and the success you have. We shouldn't be mad that they're doing it. They're just doing it better than everybody else.
And I think your prime example of that is when I look at the guy up front. What's his name? His name just dropped out my head.
Dembele.
That was it. Ousmane Dembele. He was renowned as being a flair winger, but lazy, didn't track back. He was absolutely pressing within an inch of his life in that final. Even in the 80th minute, he was bombing round the pitch, and I thought that's what that team needed, was a leader that gives them direction and tells them what they're going to do. But he's also done it in such a laid back way that they've got the freedom to go and attack and use their individual skills. Such a breath of fresh air to me, that was. I now look at it and go, why aren't they in the Premier League? I'd love to watch them every week, but I think we'll be watching them win the Champions League quite often.
Well, that's interesting. So that brings us back to the Premier League. There are a couple of teams that I think are making some very, very good moves. And I think Chelsea signing a number 9, Liam Gatt, we'll come back to that. But for me, I think Manchester City and Liverpool, for two slightly different reasons, are making some very, very good moves that are making both of those teams. And I know they're not all over the line yet, but with what we're hearing, Kirkis and Verts going to Liverpool with Frimpong coming in as well. I think Man City are having a fantastic window. If you look at the money that they were going to spend on Verts, but they've now signed Serki and Reinders from AC Milan, who are two phenomenal talents. I think some of these English teams are going to be back in the mix, if I'm honest with you.
I think Liverpool, for me, are the ones, when I look at, so they get Verts over the line, to keep two players in Van Dijk and Salah, but lose Alexander-Arnold. You replaced him with Frimpong, who's a very different style of player. He's probably the only right back they could have got who's worse defensively than Alexander-Arnold, but offensively, he's absolutely mustard and he's rapid, isn't he? But to add Verts into the mix there as well, I look at that and I go, that's a warning sign to the rest of the Premier League in Europe, because they're going to look very, very good next season. I agree with you with some of the signings of Man City. I think it's just going to take a lot for them to probably bed in. It's quite a big turnover of players there, isn't there? But I mean, Shirky, I don't know how he's going to be. They've had 23 million euros turned down. I mean, if he goes for 30, 35, he looks an unbelievable talent. So how he's worth a 23 euro million bid and Florian Wirtz is 120 million euros, I don't know, because I think they're pretty on par, if I was being honest.
Well, release clauses will do that to you. So he's got a release clause that's in that ballpark figure. Lots of things we're looking at him. To be honest with you, for me, again, we go back to striking while I saw. I think a mid-table Prem team, that was in Europe, Manchester United, Spurs should have gone for him in January. Could have got him out of there in January.
Fulham were interested. There was a few teams that were sort of in and around it, which it made complete sense to me, because he does look an unbelievable. I've seen some of the videos of like his touch and his shooting, and I know it's training, but you can't have that level of talent and not convert it into a game, which he has been doing. So the fact that now it's gone from Fulham to Manchester City for that amount, I just think it's bonkers how he's not been picked up by other clubs. Like Newcastle would have been ideal.
Again, and this leads us on nicely, is that we all have to remember the conversation we've just had about PSG and salaries is that actually, if you've got the choice of two teams, with all due respect to the process, his salary is probably going to go from somewhere in the region of 40,000 to probably 250,000.
That's what Mbeumo wants as well, isn't it?
So again, when all these other teams are kicking off that Mbeumo's chosen Manchester United, and the Man United fans are going, yeah, he was a Man United fan who's growing up, all possible, but he's not getting that salary in any of the other Premier League teams. No. It's funny, you may or may not remember this, but when the news first broke, I messaged you straight away going, oh, Cunha's gone to Man United. Not sure why he's done that. He's going back with money signs, cash. Right, that's the reality of it. Is that Manchester, and they can tell us that they're a big club, and they are a big club, of course. They're a big club because they pay the wages. But they're both going to be on somewhere in the region of 250 grand a week, and they would not get that at Newcastle. They would not get that at Spurs, and they probably wouldn't get it after.
120, 150 grand, which you could say, do you then need to weigh up your ambition as a player? Do you want to go and play for, say, Newcastle, who have qualified for the Champions League, are looking to progress, world's richest owners, or do you want to go and play for a basket case club like Manchester United, but get paid double? I think it's probably a toss of a coin, really, of what you want, isn't it? Like, some people may go and pick the better project and the better club, but Manchester United being the club that they are and paying the wages, I think a lot of people would choose Manchester United, as proven by Mbeumo and Cunha.
But when we talk about things that are getting better, Manchester United have to be looked at one of those teams. Like, we could all of a sudden now, I think, between the centre forward, whoever that's going to be, and again, they might have that, as we said before, Marcus Rashford already at the club, Cunha and Mbeumo behind the centre forward, all of a sudden that starts to look a little bit tasty, doesn't it? That starts to feel like, we could be getting goals from different places, different types of goals. Yeah, they're two very good signings, regardless of why they've gone to Manchester United.
It is. I think they are good signings. My major concern with them is I think their problems just run deeper throughout the club. So a couple of signings here and there. Like, I do think they need a huge turnover of players and getting real bad eggs out like your Garnachos. So until they think that I can see that they've done that, I'd probably hold my reservations on Manchester United. But I agree with you; they are, on the face of things, two good signings of exactly what they need. It's a definite upgrade on what they've currently got.
I think the other lesson for Manchester United specifically is every player they've signed up till now has shown fantastic form at the point of when they signed Anthony, he was doing some unbelievable things in Holland, right? Like, and you can tell me that Holland's not the same.
Yeah, there's loads of examples.
Hoyland was tearing Syria apart. The list goes on. And when they get to Manchester United, for whatever reason, it doesn't materialise. So I think the Manchester United fans just need to keep that in the back of their mind. Is it, like you rightly said, something has to change for these players to start to thrive once at a time.
There's a couple of examples of players who have gone there and have flourished. One is Bruno Fernandes. One of them is Zlatan Ibrahimovic, and the other one I'd say is Casemiro. When he first came, he's just got old whilst he's there. But all of those players are elite level players who have played at other clubs before and have come in and made impacts. They've got personality. So I think when you look at that, you probably do need a different style of player. That's why I think Cunha will do well, because he's got a bit about him, and he's very arrogant. Like, he will just sort of rock up and perform. I think Mbeumo's one that potentially could flop. So I don't know if he is that. I don't know whether he'd get to Manchester United, almost go, "Oh, I'm at United now. I've come from Brentford," so he'll be one though I'd be looking at as a possible flop?
This, as we've said on here, the only surprise about him is his age. I'm a big fan. I think he's a fantastic Premier League player. He's a proven Premier League player. You know, again, what they did this year without their talisman Tony, I think is absolutely off the chart. So I actually think that he will be okay. Like you say, it's just what else is going on around him. I still think in that three, however you want to set them up in a 3-4-3, a 3-4-2-1. I'm still more worried about the two pivots. Just where does Fernandes now sit in the team? But we do need depth. So actually, maybe Fernandes doesn't have to play every minute, and actually he can sit behind the centre forward. Who is the centre forward? You know, there's still loads floating around. There's still Jonathan David, Sesko, Gokares. You know, everyone's telling me that everyone's going everywhere. Osherman looks like he's going to Saudi, which I think would be a horrible crime. But you know, that's the piece that they have to finish. Is they need to have that confidence in that number 9 at Manchester United to actually go on and kick on.
I mean, for me, Højlund would be one of the first ones I move on. I'd get him out and look for a number 9. And I would have thought Liam Delap, I know they did try that, would have been perfect because you're buying a bit of potential there with somebody who's proven in the Premier League already. Now, when you look around, because the rumours are that Jonathan David's going to Napoli, I think that looks sort of done and dusted, doesn't it? So when you do look around, there is a lack of number 9s, although the 9s that are available are going to be very, very expensive. And I don't think United can keep shelling out this level of money. PSR has to come into effect sooner or later for a lot of these clubs, even Manchester City. Like, they're shelling out some huge amounts. So, yeah, I'd be looking. I mean, the one for me was Fernandes. I know he's obviously declined the Saudi move, but that for me was the ideal opportunity to rake in huge transfer fee, get you one of your big earners off the books, and reinvest.
He's on £300 a week. Only the second highest earner at Manchester United behind Casemiro. Do you know the one that tickles my brain? Like this genuinely, like I say, I've genuinely fallen down a salary rabbit hole this week. Mason Mount.
You think? I would imagine he's on a hell of a lot.
Go on.
200 grand?
250 grand a week.
Doesn't surprise me in the slightest.
250 grand a week.
There's people like Mainu, which I know he sort of burst onto the scene. But he was on like 10 grand, wasn't he? And then you've got players around them, which he's on a big contract now as well, Mainu, hasn't he? Which would also sort of explain a bit of a dip in his form.
Yeah, well, it's a big jump. Again, obviously, I'm using sources that I don't have access to their actual salaries, but the rumour is that he's on 25k a week now, which from where he was is a massive jump up. And part of the reason why I think somebody would be able to get him out of there. But and you talk about PSR, and it's interesting because actually the one team that are at the top end of this is actually Aston Villa. Aston Villa have got a real problem here because of their wage bills, 93 or 94% of their turnover. And if you look at what they're paying some of their players, it is absolutely mind-bending.
Well, they Aston Villa remind me of Leicester when they were in and around the top 4 and had opportunities to try and cement there. So Leicester were 106% of turnover, I think they were, which is just mind-blowing. But the same with Villa. It's just a price that they pay. They're going to have to pay a price to try and compete with the big boys. And I think it is slightly unfair, but you can also say it's bad financial management. But they're having a go, aren't they, to try and make themselves a top team. And it's just very, very difficult when you're not able to get the level of income, say, of a Manchester United, that you can't compete. But if your owner is able to finance it, it doesn't make sense to me why they can't.
Yeah, the rules are the rules, right? So we all know what the rules are, whether we agree with them, whether we like them, you know, and whether people found ways around it. We get all of that, but ultimately, for me, they're just paying. Like, so if I said to you, Daniel Marlin is on how much a week?
He'll be on 150 grand easy.
Pretty much 140 grand a week.
Yeah.
He's on more than Ollie Watkins, by the way.
Yeah. Well, that to me is financial mismanagement, though, because he's never been a standout player. You should not be paying someone like that those wages.
But that's my point. That's my point, is that I don't mind. So if you look at, if I said to you who are Aston Villa's top 2 earners, the top 3 earners, who do you think they are?
I would have thought Emi Martinez will be one.
150k. Yeah. So, by the way, I've removed Marcus Rashford from this because he's a loan player. So I'm talking about actual contracted players.
Yeah. Who else have we got? Midfield, John McGinn?
No, he's quite a way down the list on 120 grand a week.
Youri Tielemans will definitely be one of them.
150 grand a week.
He came on a free as well. Yeah.
Yeah, 150 grand a week. There's one more that came in on a free that's on 150 grand a week.
Oh, the defensive midfielder, Kamara.
Correct.
Yeah.
So there's 450 grand Banana, 140 grand. Marlon, 140 grand. Lucas Digne, 120 grand.
Well, I can do these examples as well, so I know the Leicester wage bill well. Um, Leicester have just released Jamie Vardy, Daniel Everson, and um, Danny Ward. So 3 players who've just come to the end of the contract. It equates to £10 million a year. 2 of those players didn't make a single appearance in 2 years. Like it's absolutely bonkers what some of these clubs are paying backup players. Like I say, Daniel Everson was probably on 25, 30 grand. It was the 4th choice goalkeeper. Like, how can you afford to pay that? It's just, honestly, some of the figures, and let's say I go back to Leicester, Buba Samare's on 100 grand. Like, how are some of these players, Yannick Vestergaard's 70, 80 grand? Some of these players are rocking up at clubs demanding that money and they're being given it. Like, who is signing this off?
It's crazy. Again, Aston Villa are going to have a very difficult summer. The problem is, of course, that as Jadon Sancho found out with Chelsea, is that they don't want to pay his salary. They paid the £5 million to send him back because the numbers don't stack up. And Aston Villa are going to find the same problem: is that actually the value is in, ironically, the players that they really don't. So Morgan Rogers on 75 grand, Jacob Ramsey's on 70 grand, uh, even a
Even Jacob Ramsey on 70 grand, he's a bits and pieces player. Like, that's crazy wages for a squad player.
Matson's on 100, mate. Pau Torres is on 100. It is Ross Barkley's on 60. Robin Olsen's on 50 grand a week.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Like, genuinely, like, I get that whether we like the rules or don't like the rules. For me, that is a very, very expensive. Their weekly salary is 2.5 million.
To me, the one that's obvious and screaming you in the face there is Emi Martinez.
Well,
Getting on a bit already. You'd still get a good bit of cash for him, and I do think he's overrated. You could replace him with there's a couple of goalkeepers flying around who you could replace him with, who would come on a lot less salaries.
Well, I know we're bounced, but it's all transfer related. The one that surprised me is Flecken.
Very small transfer fee for a good goalkeeper. I was surprised by that.
I was really surprised by it. Like, or loads of us, keep holding Brentford up as being bastions of great business. They've signed Liverpool's third choice goalkeeper. He will be, because obviously they've signed that Marish, the guy from Spain, for 18 and sold Flecken for 10. Like, that feels to me like a really bad bit of business.
How old was Flecken? I mean, is he older than? Is he got the reverse Bremo disease?
Don't get me on this one, mate, because this is going to be my nothing now. 93, so he's 22.
22. Flecken's 22.
32.
So now that sort of makes a little bit of sense, because Kelleher's like 25, isn't he? So they've probably bought him a bit of longevity, spread that out across the years. So I could sort of understand that, and I do think Kelleher is a good keeper. He just needs a bit of a chance to stay as the number one, doesn't he? So sort of makes sense. But yeah, I thought you'd get a bit more for Flecken than that. He is a good goalkeeper.
Yeah, like I say, it's just I just thought it was interesting for me that again we see Kelleher playing a couple of games this season and he does well. What's he going to be like with the number one shirt on his back? Is he going to be able to handle that pressure? Because again, Brentford do concede a lot of shots. If you look at the amount of saves in the Premier League this season, I think Flecken off the top of my head is certainly top 2 or 3, if not number 1, in terms of saves made, because they do concede a lot of chances.
I'm sure he was. Yeah, I'm sure it was him and Hermansen for quite a while who had made the most saves.
So it'll be interesting to see how he does there, because, but like I say, all this summer is fascinating, because obviously there's that early window which teams are trying to get all their business done, and there's lots of teams getting excited about the players bought in, not realising that they're going to have to lose a lot of players in the back end. We're talking about people like Marcus Rashford, Jadon Sancho. Anthony goes back to Manchester United. So there's 3 players alone that Man United have got to try and move on to cover the income. And if you look at Man City, we've spoken about, there's talk that even Phil Foden is potentially available at the right price. Jack Grealish, Kyle Walker, James McAtee, Kovacic, Gundogan. But all these players, they can't all find someone, can they?
That's a real problem for Man City, though. And when you were naming those players, with the exception of Phil Foden, who I think will probably have his pick of clubs if he is made available.
I think he stays.
Yeah, I do as well. But all of those other people that you mentioned, even Jack Grealish, are 30 plus, all of them on huge wages. It's going to be very difficult for a club to pick them up for a relatively cheap transfer fee and also pay them less wages. I said Jack Grealish would be on phenomenal wages, like Kovacic. There's a lot of them, like who are going to be on massive wages. So they've almost got the Manchester United problem, haven't they? Of a few years ago, when we're looking, going, there's so many big earners there who've got no resale value really.
So,
Kyle Walker, like who's having Kyle Walker?
yeah, no, yeah. I mean, so Jack Grealish is on 300 grand. Kyle Walker's got a year left on his contract, essentially. So again, it runs out in June 26. So you've got this. Calvin Phillips hasn't been spoken about, in terms of what happens to him now, because it's not like he came in and was bossing Ipswich midfield.
The obvious one there is Leeds, isn't it? Which there's rumours around that, but I've seen loads of Leeds fans question it, saying, "How can you possibly put any hope into Calvin Phillips? He's not the player he was."
It's definitely not. You look at John Stones. John Stones is on 250 grand a week.
And he 32, 33 now? Like, again,
The
nobody's
one's on.
really coming in for him. He's very injury prone.
But I was listening to something last night whilst taking my son to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and they were talking about how they think that Jack Grealish will go for 50 million quid. I'm like, no chance is anybody giving you 50 million quid for Jack Grealish. Based on what? Like, I think he goes for less than 20 million quid.
Or on loan. I think he's more likely to go on loan.
I don't think they can get him out the door. Like, he hasn't played really any football for 2 years. Like you say, he's touching 30. I think he's 30. He's 29 at the moment, touching 30 next season. And he's on 300 grand a week. Where's he going? Who's doing that?
I genuinely think that you'll probably see him go to somewhere like a Villa on loan.
But unless Man City paid 2/3 of the salary, with Aston Villa at the top of Aston Villa have to lower their wage bill, not make it bigger.
Yeah, I can't say, like, all of those players, I said, with the exception of Phil Foden, who is young, has resale value, all of them are aging players. So they're going to have a real problem shifting. So they've bought all these players in, young, and a lot of them look young, good, hungry players, which is exactly what you want to do. But they're going to have that problem of rebuilding the squad, of getting people out.
Again, I keep saying it. I've properly fallen down this rabbit. But the one player that has actually gone up in my estimation based on what they're being paid is Jeremy Doku.
How much?
Which are 50k a week.
60, yeah.
50k a week.
Good business that is, getting him on that.
All of a sudden, I look at that thinking, wow, 50k. He's on the same money as Oscar Bob, who, by the way, is a phenomenal football player. I love Oscar Bob. He's one of my favourite
product.
I love Oscar Bob. He's, seen him live. I see him play left back and dominate a game before in Premier League 2. He's an absolute phenomenal player. Savio is on 40 grand a week. So they've got a couple of little nuggets in there. But do you know what I'd be if I was serious, and I mean this sincerely, if I was Manchester City, Arsenal, Liverpool, picking a team, I'd be going for Mickey van der Ven. So Mickey van der Ven, we could argue, is one of the best centre backs in the Premier League, right? Rapid, giant.
He's one of the best centre backs in the league if you play a particular brand of football as well. If you play a very high line, he's the perfect signing.
50 grand a week, you know?
Yeah.
50 grand a week.
Romero's, I would imagine, is probably on like 130, 140.
So Romero is one of 4 players at Spurs that are on 100 grand a week or more. Yeah. So Aston Villa have got 12, Spurs have got 4. Romero's on 165. But that was because there was that big sort of chat around Real Madrid coming in for him, wasn't there? But so hence why it's actually more difficult to get him out, because again, obviously someone's got to go and match those wages and pay a big fee. But for me, Mickey van der Ven on 50 grand a week. If I was Manchester City, Liverpool, I'd be going, chuck some money at Spurs. They're apparently in turmoil. I don't know whether that's true or not, but it sounds like they are. And I'd be saying, there you go, mate, there's 150 grand a week. He doesn't say no to that.
No, he doesn't say no to that. And actually, as well, if you're Liverpool, I'm thinking of Van Dijk. Very different types of players, but left centre half is where they both play. Van der Ven is 25, something along those lines.
Van Dijk
is 32, 33. Succession planning. There you go. There's your centre half.
Yeah, I mean, Spurs are paying Radu Dragic in 85 grand a week. If I was looking at Van der Ven, I'd have my agent knocking on Daniel Levy's door in a freaking heartbeat. You'd have pound money. I'd be absolutely battering him.
Yeah, what would they say to you? So you have to wait there yet? We still haven't made a decision on Ange.
Well, but that's an interesting point, isn't it? Because we're not waiting for any other team to come out and say they're keeping their manager.
Well, there's a few who haven't really made their minds up of what they're doing. I'm looking down the pyramid as well. There's quite a few where the communication from the board to some of these managers seems absolutely shocking. And the planning, like there's some teams that have known their fate of whether that be mid-table, so you start planning early for sort of 4, 5, 6 weeks, and the lack of planning and clarity and communication to the fans is really non-existent, I feel.
But and to be fair, I think it was Dharma Sheck yesterday. So we're not waiting for Liverpool to come out and confirm that Arne Slott's going to be the manager next year. He's got a contract until they're. Well, I don't understand what we're waiting for if there's nothing to say. Like if we, so what we do know is that Spurs were thinking about letting Postecoglou go, right? The Europa League probably put a bit of a spanner in that, and there's a chance they've changed their mind. They don't need to communicate that with us. He's the manager. He's got a contract. Like I said, we're not waiting for Arsenal to tell us that Arteta stay, and we're not waiting for Chelsea to say that the rest are staying. You just carry on until you're sacked. We've created this narrative with Spurs that it's this whole big, because there's nothing else going on probably, this whole 50-50 flip of a coin. We're waiting for this big announcement where Daniel Levy comes out and says, we're going to keep Postecoglou. That's not going to happen.
I think when there's been so much media narrative around it, though, and
but that's media narrative.
It is. But then, do you not think a good PR company would almost come out and say, this is what we're doing, this is the plan, we're backing him, we're doing this? And I think then that obviously puts it all to bed and everyone gets behind. And that negativity around the actual story, which, like you said, rightly or wrongly, may have been a false narrative. But I think a good management team, the director of football, whatever it is, head of PR, they come out, they squash that, they clarify the club, what the goals are, what's going on. I think would do the world of good with that, and that's for me is where clubs are just lacking with this.
Yeah, look, I do take that on board, but again, the reality is that every summer there's rumours about, last year there was rumours about Eric Ten Hag, like every year there's going to be someone, like a couple of weeks ago it was Maresca, Graham Potter, West Ham. Like you don't come out like that old school kind of backing of the board. I think is done forever because actually that's just essentially the kiss of death, and everyone knows that now. Nonsense. I think you just carry on until you're told otherwise. And I think obviously with Spurs making some backroom changes in terms of the new chief exec coming from Arsenal, obviously losing some board members, rumours are that there is some, shall we say, discussions going on behind the scenes about who's doing what and who's responsible for what. But at the moment, if they're not doing anything possible, they don't need to come out and tell us.
Yeah, I just think with the PR piece, there's a couple of clubs that have done it well. I think recently, one of them Southampton. They've got rid of Juric early. They've then done their piece of homework that they needed to. They've announced Will Still before the end of the season, before official relegation, or not actual confirmed relegation, but being moved into the Championship was confirmed. They've signed a player. They've been able to say to the fans, this is the direction that the club is going, and the fans are on board. Another one that I think's done that pretty well was, who have they done it? Well, I can give you a bad example, is Leicester with Ruud van Nistelrooy. They've apparently not even had 6 weeks and they've not even made a decision. But there was another club who I think has done pretty well forward planning, which I've literally just forgot. But there is Wolves. Sorry, so Wolves have sacked the director of football, Hobbs, I think his name was Matt Hobbs. He's been there 10 years, but they've clearly gone, right, what we don't want to happen, what happened to us last season. They've had to sell Cunha because of a release clause, but they've got rid of their star player. They're bringing in a new board effectively to be able to revamp, rip up everything that's going on and plan going forward. So there is sort of pockets of good and bad practice around, and I think you can tell the clubs of when they've got it right, the planning, I think the noise goes away. So the noise around Southampton, you would have thought would have been through the roof, wouldn't you, with their season that they've had? But because of the forward planning, that the fans are going into that season with a lot of positivity.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because for me, Will Still has been one of those names that everybody's intrigued about. Everybody's got a little question mark about. There was talk of him coming to West Ham, wasn't there? Like, almost every job that became available, Will Still would he? And so actually, by getting him in, I think they're going to scratch a lot of people's itches. Where if you look at the former Southampton manager, Russell Martin, who's gone to Rangers, meltdown, like complete and utter meltdown. Like honestly, I must admit, I've been surprised by a lot of the fan bases across football in the last sort of 10 days around transfers with managers. Like the Rangers fans have gone absolutely bonkers because he plays football. Brendan Rodgers. I'll never forget Brendan Rodgers when he was a Liverpool manager. He came on match of the day, whatever it was. They'd lost the game. Oh yeah, but we had 59% possession. Right? Like loads of managers believe that football starts with possession. Russell Martin, I don't get it. I don't get the meltdown. So it's all about that perception, isn't it? Of that, what
I think the difference between, say, the two of them as an example is I do dislike the Brendan Rodgers style of play, but there was a period of time, say when he was at Leicester during his initial Celtic career, when it was possession, but it was with pace, and
yeah,
actually he did produce good football. Whereas a Russell Martin team is solely focused on possession. It's almost a bit clueless possession at times, and it can be quite boring to watch. So I think that's where he gets dug out a lot. Like we said before, though, if he does go away and do some learnings from his time at Southampton of what he's done well and what he was getting praised for. But if he can tweak it, defensively be solid, not play possession football for the sake of it, I think there's a good manager in there, and I like the way he talks. So I don't think. I mean, I don't know what Rangers really expect, to be honest.
I think he's going to be fine. I think he's like I say, that Monday night football
In that
performance of
league
his.
as well.
I think it doesn't. I don't think it matters where Russell Martin goes next. And I know it's Rangers now, it's confirmed. I think you're going to see a slight variation on his style of football. I just do. I think that he's learned, and sometimes you need that almost public berating and universal kind of discrediting of your system to kind of go, maybe I should look at it.
And that's why I think, so I mentioned in that league, is he's going to be the second best team. That's why I think Brendan Rodgers has always done well in that league, because he's playing possession football with the best players in the league. And the same with Russell Martin. He's going to have the second best players in the league. His acid test will be when he comes up against Celtic. Can he do it against the best team? But generally, Rangers will pass teams off the park now, and they should be a very good side. So I think it is quite a good fit there. It's like you said, whether he's going to be able to adapt against Celtic.
The other problem that you have going there is that everybody this side of the border discredits what you've done. Foster Cogley, we go back to him in terms of what he did it with Celtic. No one could do it with Celtic. Brendan Rodgers, no one could do it with Celtic. So actually, if he goes and becomes an absolute massive success at Rangers, everyone's going to know it's in Scotland.
It's Celtic, yeah. Sorry, it's Rangers, yeah.
If he doesn't, where do you go from there? Because actually, if you can't do it in Scotland, and again, I'm not saying this is right, by the way, because actually, I think sometimes it's harder to do it with a slightly lesser player. You're not paying, you're definitely not paying the wages that they're paying in the Premier League, so you're going to have a lower down the food chain type of player. But if you can't do it there, like Vincent Company, exactly the same problem, right? Brought Burnley up, went to pass. He went up to Bayern Munich. So now, if that goes wrong, he can come back down again. He's been Bayern Munich manager. But where does Russell Martin go if Rangers go from?
Yeah, I think the difference with Russell Martin, he hasn't really been to the echelons, or hasn't looked like going. So actually, you could argue that Rangers is a step up in stature of club, and if he performs there, it will enhance his CV. I think, if we're being honest, I think that's probably his argument. It's not like he's being touted around top 6 clubs or anything. So I think it will enhance. The danger is if he fails there, he'll be completely tarnished. So, however, he shouldn't fail there. He should at least finish second and give it a good go in that league.
But they would tell you that's failure. Rangers fans would tell you that's failure.
They will. I think realistically, though, I think they've got to be looking to progress. It's like a 3-4 year project with Martin, is progress year on year to end up be challenging, because if we're being honest, they're miles off it at the minute. So you can't really expect a new manager to come in and just go turn it round.
No, absolutely. It's just, it's absolutely fascinating, isn't it? Around kind of the decisions you make and where you go. And Russell Martin was being talked about, some of those teams that have got back down into the Championship, decided to go to Scotland. Like I said, I think that's a risk personally, but I hope for him and Rangers that it works out. And actually, I think Scottish football needs the good Rangers. To have Celtic dominating the way they have done for so long is not good for that league. Although the Celtic fans will probably disagree with us.
Yeah. What do you think on the teams coming down and coming up into the Championship? Then, what are your initial thoughts on some of those teams and where they're looking to be? Because I look at, say, Ipswich obviously have sold Delap now, and I look at Southampton and I can't see how they're going to be anywhere but top 2.
Yeah, I would say that we still need to see what so the Championship is a really fascinating league in the sense that you've got 2 potential giants that have come up. They've got money to spend that are going to look to disrupt in Wrexham and Birmingham. You've got 3 teams that have gone down that have been off the back of a tough year, a really tough year. Like all of them, didn't really kind of cover themselves in their glory. And then you've got that kind of move, like Middlesbrough just fired Michael Carrick as an example. You've got loads of stuff in that middle there that I think that it's going to be a very, very difficult league to get out of next year.
I think Norwich have just managed to get Liam Manning, haven't they?
Yeah.
Which they should be a better outfit next year. And it's got potential to be quite a good league. Like you said, the two coming up will definitely. I think it's going to be far more competitive than it has been. I think the three coming down aren't as streets clear as they have been in previous seasons.
What does Sheffield do? What does Sheffield United do? What do Coventry do? So those teams that missed out in the playoffs, what do they do? Like you say, you've got the Middlesbrough, West Brom have just appointed Ryan Mason. So now you're looking at kind of that space around there where actually, like I say, the interesting one for me at that level is that Nathan Jones is possibly going to Cardiff.
Done all that work, gave it all the bigging on telly about getting him up, and now he's on about going down to League One. Well, are Cardiff a bigger club than Charlton?
I think that's a very difficult question to. I think today, possibly not, but if you put them both in the Premier League or the same league, I think Cardiff have a higher upside, if I'm honest.
I wouldn't have said that they're a bit. I would have said it's very close.
But just in terms of
Cardiff,
ground size,
the biggest club in Cardiff, definitely. But I wouldn't have said that they're a bigger club than Charlton. I just said it was very close. So it's not like it's a sleeping giant moment where you've gone, oh, he's got to go there. It's a huge club, but yeah, I think it's a really random decision that is, unless the money being offered there is 2, 3, 4 times, which you don't know what he's on, but that's the only logical reason to make that step.
Oh, and he's Welsh, isn't he?
Yes, yeah.
Which I don't know who he's for.
No one wants to live there.
Okay. That is Fran's opinion, everybody. If any of you, please send it towards Fran.
Send it to me.
I'm not interested in that conversation at all. But I agree with you. I think that the Championship is going to be a very, very interesting place to go. I mean, at the moment, I couldn't tell you who I think. I don't think all three come back up. If I'm honest with you, I think that the three that have got.
I think Ipswich are. So for a couple of early predictions, I think Liverpool are a fantastic bet for the Premier League. At the odds, I think they're 2-1, which if they do the bits and pieces, I think they're a good bet. And I think Ipswich are a fantastic bet. I think they're 4-1, which if they just lose Liam Delap, I've not seen any other links for any of their players. They're obviously going to lose Calvin Phillips, but the rest of them are top-end Championship players, which they finished second the previous time. They're going to looks like they're going to keep the manager. I've not heard any rumours about that. 4-1 to me is a fantastic bet to win that.
Yeah, as we've said, we will swing back round and have those conversations once we've had a little bit of we made that mistake last year of talking about teams before the window was closed. We're not going to make that mistake twice, but absolutely, as it stands, let's say, what does Sheffield United do? What's their budget looking like? Where do they go with that? Because obviously, they were so close this year. And talk about the teams coming up. I can only see a very, very long season for them because I don't see at the moment who's going to be worse for them to catch up, if that makes sense.
I think Charlton, like I said, especially if Nathan Jones does go, are the obvious candidates to finish bottom. So they do look like they're going to be miles off it without some investment, which I don't think they have. The interesting thing for me with the Championship, the teams coming down, it's the second time they've come down in 2 seasons, isn't it, effectively? So therefore their parachute payments and their PSR budgets are going to be nowhere near as much as they were the previous times. Also with Sheffield, their parachute, I think they still will be on parachute payments, but their PSR are limits. So all of them are going to have to cut their cloth accordingly or massively break PSR limits and risk points deductions and those sorts of things. So that's going to be interesting because I think you're going to see a far more level playing field.
And of course, it depends on what happens with Leicester and any kind of production that they have as well. Because obviously, if they do, that changes the landscape. Because you'd have to imagine they'd be in that mix. And of course, the one team that I think was closer than we thought was Coventry. Obviously pushed some of them really close. It took almost a last second for them to go through without needing to go to penalties. If they can keep that squad together, Coventry could be an interesting team to throw in the mix.
Coventry are definitely one who will be there or thereabouts. It's just whether or not they're going to have the PSR capabilities because they still spent a fair bit of cash under Lampard. I just wonder whether they're going to be able to keep. So there's links already around Radoni from Coventry of where he's going, and it's going to be very difficult to replace those sorts of players. So yeah, PSR is going to be the leveler here, which I think for a competitive league is a great thing. PSR will definitely be the leveler, but I do think there's going to be quite a lot of teams falling foul of it because I don't really see the team that's done it sort of organically. Say Ipswich are the team that have done it organically by getting promoted, spending that money, coming back down. So they, for me, are the standout prospect because of that.
The team just to start out there, there's a bit of a one to watch is Millwall.
Yeah.
What he's done, Alex Mill, since coming in, I think November, December. They only missed out on the playoffs by 2 points in the end, which is obviously nothing in the grand scheme of things from where they were. If they can keep the squad together, if they can add a couple of there was a couple of rumours about Tanganga. They've got a £1.2 million release clause or something like that. But the job that he's done there, I think, goes under the radar quite a lot. And actually, if they get the window right and keep them together, that could be interesting to see what he could do with it. It's a horrible place to go and play football.
Yeah. The other shout for me is probably not from a promotional point of view, but from a team that I think will outperform where they finish is Derby. I think John Eustace is a very, very good manager, and what he's done going in there, one to save them, but they would look to be kicking on at the end of the season. And if he gets a little bit of cash here and there, I think he'll be able to make Derby a lot better team and probably not be in and around that relegation zone.
Yeah, and then we come to the three teams that have come up, and I think all of them need an absolute miracle in the Premier League. I can't see anything other than, because look at last year, and Everton were discussed as a team that could potentially go down if things don't go their way. That's not the case anymore. I don't see who they get past. I don't see who finishes 17th or 18th if it's not one of the three that come up
for the Premier League.
Yeah,
I think Leeds are the only one. The more and more I look at it, I say it looks like Burnley are being picked apart by a few people leaving, Trafford potentially going. So I think they're gonna struggle. Sunderland have got a chance because of their good scouting networks, but I mean I've seen them linked to Jordan Henderson and a few players, which it won't be a bad signing, but I just don't know whether he's there. You need energy and running, and he was that sort of player, but he's obviously aging. Leeds to me are just the outstanding team who can do it just because they are a young team and they do press a lot. They are quite high. And Farker's just the worry, isn't he? Is whether he is now going to be able to convert it. And obviously all of his previous experience with Norwich, who were never really given a fair crack because they were just looking to be that yo-yo team, weren't they? Whereas I do think Leeds will sign some good players with the Red Bull network behind them. So I think if Leeds can't do it, then I think that cycle will be firmly set in now, and you'll see that 3 up, 3 down every single time.
The problem for Leeds is that they've got a goalkeeper that gives away goals regularly.
They are being linked to a lot of goalkeepers. It just looks like they're trying to address it.
But also they've lost Manor Solomon, who was one of their key players in terms of that.
No links for him going back at all?
Oh, I'm sure they'd like to, yeah, but absolutely yes, but it's not done, and obviously he's. My understanding is that Marseille are looking at an example, so there's other teams that are now interested in what he can do with his output. So there's no given that he goes back there. I think it probably makes a bit of sense for everybody concerned, but it's not done. So actually, when you look at what they had last season, they do need to add quite a bit for me. And like I say, I just don't think that they'll have the. I don't know, like if there's a good goalkeeper on the market, the other teams need goalkeepers. Like, why do you pick Leeds over anybody else at the moment? I can't really think of, other than they're going to pay you 30 grand a week more. I don't really get why you go to Leeds.
Yeah, I think it's more of a case they've just got to be sensible with their transfers, haven't they? Like they have done, to be honest, in the past few windows, like Ayo Tanaka going out and getting teams where they would see Leeds as a step up, as opposed to sort of in and around the levels that they are, and it then comes down to wages and PSR. I think you've got to be imaginative, and there is a lot of good goalkeepers who are not. I mean, when you look in the free transfer market, there's some good goalkeepers on freeze at the minute.
Yeah, absolutely. Look,
even short-term stopgaps like your Fabianskis. I'm not saying you look at him and you go, wow, but he's 40, but he's still a proven Premier League goalkeeper who you could get for free, who's a better goalkeeper than Meslier. You could cash in and get Fabianski for free, and you've upgraded.
It's a cash in. I'm not sure that you're going to get loads of people chasing you, knocking your door down, but I get your point.
No, but you're still going to get some. I'd imagine a French team would take him. He's not that bad of a goalkeeper.
No, I think sometimes he just probably needs to have someone else around him. I think.
Yeah, fresh settings.
I think actually he's a very good goalkeeper. He's been playing the first team football since a very young age. It just was at the pressure points of last season where he made a couple of mistakes that could have cost Leeds massively. Didn't in the end. Great. But yeah, like I said, I can't see how any of them do anything. But it's great that I saw a great gag. I can't remember what it was now, but about Enzo Lafayette at Sunderland. Obviously, they signed him for an undisclosed fee. And someone did quite a witty pun around Enzo Lafayette for an undisclosed fee. There was something quite clever around that, which I can't remember off the top of my head. But getting him in at least gives him a chance. But the one story coming out of Sunderland, and again, I'll be honest, I haven't watched kind of hours and hours of Sunderland, but I've watched quite a bit of them. Is that I don't get how they're getting anywhere near 30 million Bellingham.
We sort of we touched it a bit last week, didn't we? It's got to be off his brother's name. He moves just exactly like Jude. Like the way that he plays is very, very, very similar. However, I've watched him a fair bit. He's not a patch, and he doesn't look like he's got any of the potential that you saw in Jude Bellingham. He's running style. He is a carbon copy physically of Jude, but from what I've seen, he scores similar sort of goals where he sort of drifts into the box and he's there, but he doesn't really dominate the ball. Jude Bellingham glides by players when he's got the ball. I've not seen Jobe do that, so I think it's got to be just sort of the looking and going if he's got anywhere near the potential of his brother. But I don't. From what I've seen, I haven't seen that potential.
No, but again, lots of Sunderland fans are saying that they're devastated for that sort of money. So, and if that's true, then they're better than me. But for me, I think I'll be taking that money and looking to reinvest it. Because, like you say, even looking down the release list in the Premier League, there's enough players in there that you be able to do something interesting with and make an impact in the team immediately.
Yeah, I think that when you look at the release list, I mean, it was always when you looked at the release list, there was 2 or 3 players who were standouts and big clubs would fight over them. I think there's a lot of players on the release list now who are not 35 as well. I'm looking at people like Decore. I think he'd be a good pickup for a few sides. He's proven at the Premier League level. Yes, it was for Everton who were in and around it, but he's a decent player. Now, I don't think he'd command huge wages, but there's a lot of players similar to that who are now on frees who, again, they'll be able to command bigger wages, but I don't think you have to be that clever in the market. Now, you can look at a lot of free transfers and you're going to see that theme continue, I think, because of the wages that are being paid to free transfers, as you've just highlighted. Quite a lot of people, you said at other clubs who have come on frees, your Tielemans, your Cameras, they're going to command bigger wages. So I don't think you have to be that imaginative now with your transfer strategy. You can just look around who's no longer under contract.
No, I completely agree, and it's going to be, as we keep saying, a very fascinating summer. I know that you did have some questions, but I think we're going to have to hold them for next week because that will be stuck banging in the international fixtures, which would work because I am up against the time has flown by. I feel like we've just had a conversation. Normally we talk about some specifics, and we just chatted for nearly an hour there, and that's absolutely gone without. I don't know where that disappeared to. So I enjoyed it. Hopefully somebody else out there enjoyed it as well. But where can people? I don't know if you've been upsetting people on social media this week, by the way. I haven't heard anything from you. But where can people find us if they get angry?
Been a good boy this week. I don't think I've upset anyone yet. I will do. I'll go out my way to try and do that now.
I did see one. There's a political one. You did one about I don't know who it was, but some Labour MP that you got a couple of bites back on. But yeah, football wise, you've been pretty good.
Yeah, well, I tried to keep away from it, but sometimes I just get drawn in. But so yeah, we're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, we're on TikTok. If you search for The Atmosphere is Electric, you'll be able to find us. If you want to listen to the episodes, we are on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube.
As always, bud, I really, really enjoyed that, and I'm looking forward to us being able to kind of unpick the transfer window, and maybe we'll give some of them a specific title so that we know what we're talking about. But yeah, no, that's really good. Thank you very much, buddy. I look forward to speaking next week. Have a great week.